to start by thanking Mia Reichel for her willingness to underwrite the entire church budget for the coming year. I appreciate that. You don't remember? You don't remember?
I do, and I thought, well, so are you saying that I'm stupid? Because
You know, I thought about that, and I didn't mean to be insulting, but I was wondering how much money you actually have. Because for those of you who weren't here last week, let me explain. I had suggested a stewardship program based on paying 1 penny for every prayer that isn't answered the way the person prayed for it wants. And I had suggested last week that perhaps even if someone only ponied up a penny for every prayer offered by a San Diego Padres fan, we could cover the budget. Mia volunteered to do that. So we don't really need to have a stewardship program. But you know, Mia, I don't think that's really fair of us. I think we're going to let you off the hook. Because it's better when we share, when we all take our bit of the burden. So thank you for your offer. We can't do that to you. You're welcome, Chuck. And no, Chuck did not ask me to let me off the hook. Really, he didn't. Now, perhaps if over the years we had taken every Chicago Cubs fan's prayers, we would have been able to make our budget, but as you were just reminding us, this is the year perhaps that everything turns around. Now, things do turn around, even in their bleakest times. And that's really what the prophet Joel was talking about. It was almost as if he were speaking to the population of Chicago when he said, all things have been going terribly for you from time immemorial, but now things are going to be different. But you know, it wasn't sports that God was talking about. God was talking to a people who had been living in slavery, who had been exiled to Babylon, who had been dreaming of return to their homeland. And so Joel speaks these words of hope to a people who have no hope left. And God speaks of paying back. Not in the sense of vengeance, but of making things right. I will pay you back for all of those years that you've done without. Those years when the grasshopper swarmed the nature crops. Those years when things went wrong after wrong after wrong. Instead, you will come back to your home and you will find vats overflowing with wine and olive oil. You will find that all of creation is now conspiring with you for your good. What a gift. For people who had been doing without for so long, for people who had given up hope. To be given this word from the prophet that tells them, hold on just a little bit longer. For the day of the Lord is indeed coming. And not only will you have enough to eat and to spare, but I will pour out my Spirit upon you. Your sons and your daughters will prophesy. Even your servants will speak my word. I will be present with the people. We hunger for a day like that too, don't we? For that day when God is so present among us that even those that we societally look down on speak a word of hope and peace. Talking with our children a little bit ago, reminding them that they have a word to speak to us. What a gift. What a blessing. If only we keep our ears open to hear that word of hope. But you know, sometimes we do indeed look down on others, don't We think, oh, they're just children. What could they possibly tell us? Oh, they're just foreigners. What do they know? Oh, they're just fill in the blank. There are lots of ways that we discount people, aren't there? Yeah, of course there are. We think that God speaks to us perhaps more than other folks. You know, those people who go to the wrong church, those people who have the wrong ideas, those people who aren't in the same place that we are, theologically or politically. But God indeed speaks to all of us. That's the gift of the prophet Joel's words, reminding us indeed that God speaks to all who are willing to listen and willing to share that word. Jesus confronted that same attitude when he was traveling around, and he shared the story of the Pharisee who went into the temple and offered a prayer to God, giving thanks for all that he was. That's he, the Pharisee, not he, God. God, I give you thanks that I'm not like all of these other people. I tithe. I give 10% of my income for your work. I fast twice a week. God, I am so good. And you're welcome. That was the Pharisee's prayer. Now, it's important to realize that we have been, in many ways, poisoned by 2,000 years of church tradition. We've gotten used to the Pharisees being the bad guys whenever we come across them. We are conditioned to automatically say, Pharisee, well, we know where this one's going. But in Jesus' day, when he was telling this story, his hearers, good Jewish people, would have heard the Pharisee as the one they expected to walk in as the good guy in the story. If this were a Western, the Pharisee would be wearing a white hat. The Pharisees were the religious folks of the day. They were like you and me. They were the people who were in the temple every time the doors were open. They were the people who made sure that God's work was done. And so we should be identifying perhaps with the Pharisee. We don't want to. We've heard the story too many times to just start off identifying with the Pharisee, but that's where we need to start. Because what happens is a shock, if it's the first time you've heard the story. That this good religious person who is giving God thanks for his own righteousness turns out to be the bad guy. But the tax collector, on the other hand, the one that if we were in Jesus' day hearing this parable for the first time, we would all boo and hiss. Tax collectors. Now, none of us particularly care for writing that check to the IRS. You know, I had filed an extension back in April, and I just wrote my check last week. Oops. But at any rate, none of us enjoy sitting down and writing that check and having it go off to Washington. But there's a significant difference. It's our own government we're funding. In Jesus' day, this tax was going off to Rome, to the occupying military power. It wasn't supporting your own system of government, it was supporting a military occupation of your own people. And even though the tax collectors looked just like you, they were in collusion. Imagine perhaps a system during the Second World War in France, under the German occupation, where the French people were sending their money to Berlin. That's what it felt like. The tax collector wasn't just someone who took your money and frankly you kind of wish they'd let you keep a little more of it. They were the representative, the traitorous representative of a foreign occupying military power. Boo. Hiss. Yet this tax collector goes to the temple, doesn't even look up to address God, but simply says, Lord, have mercy on me, a sinner. The tables are turned. The good religious person is the bad guy, the traitor is the good guy, and Jesus' hearers scratch their heads. And maybe we should, too. We do a lot around here as God's people, don't we? We could phrase our prayer just like the Pharisee did. Lord, I sing in the choir. Right? Lord, I'm on the board of deacons. Lord, I get up here and I preach a sermon every Sunday morning and I'm the best. It's not true, is it? None of us are really the best. But take a minute. Try on those Pharisee shoes for just a second. What is it that you would hold up as your pride? As the thing that you do that God should really respect? And you don't have to tell me what it is, but just think for a second. You got it? You all have something. You all do wonderful work here. Every single one of you. You have things you can be proud of and legitimately. Now take another second. Look around you. No, for real, look around you. That person sitting 2 pews away, I have a secret for you. Their life's a mess. Right? You may not know exactly how their life's a mess. You may not know what it is that is ripping them apart on the inside. You may not have a clue what it is that they struggle with. But I guarantee you, that person sitting 2 pews away, total and complete mess. By the way, if you didn't look around and you just kept looking forward, that guy in the black robe, whew! Yeah, there aren't words there. But that's where we find ourselves, isn't it? We look around and we see people who don't measure up. We look inside, we see people who are perhaps almost as good as Jesus. Until we really look. Until we realize that that person 2 pews away who's looking right back at us sees someone whose life is every bit as big a mess as theirs is. Without naming the stuff in our lives, it's there. So maybe we got a little bit of that Pharisee in us, but we've also all got a little bit of that tax collector in us. The one who can't keep it together, the one who every time an opportunity to mess up comes along can't pass it up. And so we pray, Lord, have mercy on me, a sinner. We find some grace there, don't we? That grace that comes from forgiveness, that grace that comes from being reminded once again that maybe I'm not as bad as I feel on the inside. But you know, maybe sometimes it needs to be the other reminder too. Because I'm not quite as good as I feel on the inside either, especially when I compare myself to someone else whose life is probably a mess too. Jesus is telling us in this parable that it's in that comparison that we get into trouble. It's when we live in our own skin, when we take stock of who we are and what we need, that we're really opened up to grace. There's a lot that goes on there. Because when we look at the person praying next to us, not as a point of comparison, but as a sister or brother whose life is perhaps every bit as messy as ours, and every bit as blessed as ours, something changes. Because we come together as God's people, with an arm around the shoulder, with a hand out to help someone along. We come together as people with a shared mission and a shared vision. Now that Pharisee who bragged about his tithe, see, you knew we'd get back to stewardship, didn't you? That Pharisee who bragged about his tithe looked down on others. Now, I have no idea what anybody in this church gives, and rightly so. What you contribute to the work of this congregation and to the work of our United Church of Christ beyond our walls is between you and God. And I guess whoever's counting the offering. But I don't know. Because it's important that each one of you know that whenever you come across a problem, I will be there for you, and the church will be there for you, without any consideration of dollars and cents. Some of you may be writing a check for 10% pre-tax income and dropping it in the plate. If so, beautiful. Some of you may be coming to this place and reaching in your pocket and finding only lint. And if that's so, that's okay too. Because this is a place where we are all gathered to support one another. To work together to the best of our ability. We talk about time, talents, and treasure. And it's important that you hear that. Each one of us has something to contribute. And that time and that talent comes first. The treasure is the next thing down the line. Of course we need it to keep the lights on. We need it to pay the staff. We need it to support the work of our denomination. Of course we do. But that's not the important thing here. The important thing is our life together. And so look around. See someone 2 pews away, whose life is a mess just like yours is, who brings their best self to this place just like you do. Look and see the face of God in the face of a sister or a brother. Look, for real. Go on, do it. Yeah. And so you bunch of Pharisees, you bunch of tax collectors, you bunch of children of God, know that God is with you, that God is with us. When we look inward, when we look outward, when we join hands to do God's work. Today is the first day of our stewardship season, but it's not the last. For God calls us to live lives of faithful service, bringing our time, bringing our talents, bringing our treasures, bringing our hearts. May God be with us as we journey together. Amen.